Mariana. I will now turn it over to Professor Jim Saslow.
Okay. Help me out here, Nalini. Should we just have everybody on screen in the gallery view?
Yeah, gallery view would be great.
Okay, I got it. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. What I'd like to do now is ask each of the facilitators from the breakout groups to report back to us very briefly, less than a minute each because we're tight for time, about what were the themes or the main ideas, or some of them, that came up in your session. And then we'll try to pull them all together at the end. How did you discuss issues of storytelling and its impact? And what might we be able to take away from the discussion in your group? So let's start with Emily, okay?
Hi, so this is Emily. Thanks for having us. My group, we discussed a lot about how the introduction of new vocabulary over the past few weeks and learning a lot of new vocabulary has really shifted the shape of the way people are understanding their own stories and also how they're relating to other people's stories now.
That's great. New language. All right. Nalini, you had a group, yes?
Yes, I did have a group. So we spoke often about the power imbalances and how power imbalances inform so many stories and experiences of injustice, and how they can often get in the way of being able to recraft a story.
Power imbalance. All right, great. Thank you. Who would like to be next? I don't have everybody on my screen here.
I'll go up next. This is Shah.
Okay, great.
So what we realized, we had a very a great group. We had Hawaiian, Ecuadorian, Midwest, Italian, Indian, and Haitian American people in our group. And a common theme was just there were so many assumptions that are made based on appearance for people, and everybody wanted to, they want to stand up for themselves and be able to stand up for themselves and talk to people. Whatever happened to them, they wanted to go ahead and speak up at that time, but they weren't able to. And they realized that everybody has to, they want to embrace, they want people to know that they want to embrace, you should embrace where you come from and continue that tradition, whether it's whatever your native language is, you want to keep that, because sometimes there was one specific example where the family came to America and the parents told them to speak English only. They didn't want them to teach their native language. So everybody, that's one thing that resonated, that they want to stand up and say that it's okay, that they want to carry on the tradition.
All right, so we have a kind of tension there, or a dialectic between fitting in and remaining true to your own original identity, which is very interesting. All righty.
It's Maya next.
Okay, great.
Hi, everyone. Our group was really thoughtful about next steps. I think everybody in my group was thinking, okay, I've identified some of these problems. I've been really mired in thinking about them. What is the story going to be around change? And what is the story going to be around how we talk to children about change, how we talk to colleagues about change, how we talk to friends about change? I think that's something that everybody that was, and we even had a small child in our group with one of our members. I don't want to say a baby because I don't know the exact age, but so really kind of thinking about moving forward with our stories and what does that mean?
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Okay.
Hi, this is Natalie. I'll go ahead and share. Our group had 2 generations in the same family and diversity, which was great. And we really talked about the fact that we are complex individuals in a complex environment. And yet we have a legacy of inspiration that we can use to move forward. And one of the themes was the need to of the arrival of ourselves, making sure that we don't, as we heard at the beginning, whitewash, gloss over, blend in, cover up to be a part of, but remain unique. Use what the good and the bad of the past, the stories, to build the legacy and use that to move forward authentically, using the good and the bad. It was a great group, great conversation, and yes, we ran out of time midstream. So thank you.
Okay, who we got left?
I can go.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So we had a really wonderful group of people who came to share and came to listen. It was a good balance. The first person to speak really grounded us in the fact that she ran a couple daycares for almost 2 decades, and knew inherently that children don't see each other based on like appearance, but based on behavior and based on character. And there's a lot of solidarity that can happen from that. And she shared the sentiment that we all share the same stories, and how we talk about our families, and how we talk about where we come from and what we represent, which was really grounding. And then the other nuance that I think was really important to our conversations, we had someone join almost mid-conversation, and she shared the story of Al Sharpton learning that his last name was actually inherited from the slave owners of his ancestors, and how he learned that in his 60s. And that's something that like potentially shook him to his core, but it's a discernment between what can be dismantled and what needs to be dealt with. And unfortunately, that's probably a circumstance where it needs to be dealt with, and there's only so much you can do to reconcile that. And really wrestling with that is really important in the stories we tell. And then finally, just when it comes to this kind of an optimism that was shared in our group, is around sharing stories. Right now, there seems to be a newfound vulnerability and willingness to listen. And as long as that is maintained, it gives people the space to show up and share their stories towards a specific purpose of progressing kind of the circumstances that we're in. And I'm just really appreciative of the group that we had.
Ah, wonderful. Thank you. All righty.
Go. This is Leon, they, them, coming to you live from Inside Out. So our group went through quite a bit, and I would say we really focused on all the layers. Just how much we learn now is so influenced by our internalized racism in terms of our biases to how we communicate interpersonally, whether that's different tones or different perspectives, to just how institutional and structural racism has basically shifted the frame of what we have access to, and that's drastically changing now. There was this theme of imperfection as well, that this journey isn't asking us to boil the ocean, credit to Racine, but to really take those steps because we need action, and to create environments that welcome those actions. So thank you to the group.
Wonderful, thanks. You know, I didn't actually give a report about our group, although I think much of what we dealt with was similar to what you're talking, all of the rest of you have spoken about. But if I can pull them all together by starting with the group that I just was with, one of the things that we found particularly interesting is that not all stories are stories of difference and tension and conflict. In fact, the stories in our group, probably somewhat exceptional, but nevertheless, they were about people who were telling lives of relative racial and ethnic familiarity and getting along. And they had distinct geographic and social reasons for that. But the point is that what we brought away from this is we're so used to hearing the stories of conflict and tension that we think that that's the only way we can possibly be in relationships between different groups. And the answer was no. Actually, we have stories here going back a very long historical way about how people did get along and didn't necessarily find themselves conflicted and at odds about racial identity and getting along. So it is possible to imagine alternatives. They already exist in other places. I think sometimes living in America with our most particularly dismal history on these issues, we tend to think that's the only way it could possibly be. Of course, African Americans are going to be, you know, bitter for the next 5,000 years about everything that happened. And of course, white people are going to be intransigent about not giving up their privilege. But in fact, the examples we heard were people who, for various reasons, just didn't go there. They were, of course, aware of racial identities and people's ethnic background and geographic background. But in the context of their growing up and their societies, those things did not signify so heavily as they do here. The words that I'm picking up from everybody's summaries of your breakouts: power, listening, complexity, action, vocabulary, right? Tradition. Those are all the things that are tied into the stories that we tell and retell. And also, Natalie mentioned this, the complexity of every individual and every environment. We need to be alert to the fact that everybody's different from everybody else and they come from a different place. And that is one of the ways that we overcome stereotypical group categorization, right? Something that came in up in our group was that the stories you are told about people you don't know very well are maybe the only thing you know about them, and so they have enormous power. But once you actually know a person or a group of people within that group about which you've heard these stories, you're in a position to say that vicious stereotype about one group is not necessarily 100% true, because I know a few people it doesn't apply to. And that's basically called cognitive dissonance in academia. When you have been taught something and you learn a fact which conflicts with the story you've been told, you're faced with a crossroads. Do I continue to believe what I was told? Or do I rethink what I know in order to create a new generalization that includes everybody? And it's the hardest thing to get most people to do. We are invested in the stories we've heard, and it's difficult to kick us off of them. But it is possible, and we've had examples today of people who've talked about it very effectively. So I think going forward, the big lesson for us from today's discussion is stories are very important, but stories are also a possible way of holding back progress. And we all have to be very self-aware about the stories we tell and the stories we believe.